Okay, apparently we are broadcasting.
Yay.
So exciting. Okay, I'm going to get started and assume a few more people might trickle in. So, last session of the day, woo! How's it going? All right. So, welcome to Drupal Administration for Regular Humans. My name is Victoria Merriman, and I'm with Digital Loom. And let's see if I can figure out how to advance slides. Yes. So at Digital Loom, we try really hard to make the web a more beautiful, intuitive, and engaging place. And just a little bit of background for you, we work mostly with higher education and nonprofit clients. Let's go back here, actually. And most of our sites end up being very large and complex, meaning that they have a lot of users who are managing content and reviewing content and administering the site. They also have many, many nodes. And so they end up being quite complicated. And as a result, we've had to think a lot about what the back-end experience is like for our administrators and making that as intuitive as it can be. So I want to give you a little bit of context for this talk. Like I said, our sites tend to be really complicated, so that's why we've put so much thought into the user experience. Your sites may be less complicated or more complicated, so you can pick and choose what makes sense for you. In this talk, I'm going to focus more on what and why we do it versus how. I'm not the technical person. A few developers from my company are over here, so maybe they can pitch in if you really want to know how. And I'm going to be assuming some very basic knowledge of Drupal, so I'm going to say things like talk about views, blocks, panels, content types, nodes. I'm assuming you guys know what those mean. If you don't, we can talk later. And big shocker, we are still learning Drupal 8, like probably all of you are too. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is a little bit experimental or stuff that we're trying to replicate. But basically, I'm going to talk about what our goal is as a user experience and then kind of how we've sort of gotten there in Drupal 8. And again, I'd love that to be a conversation if anybody here knows things that we don't. Okay, so the first thing to ask is, who are your regular humans? Assuming you're building a Drupal website, the whole point of a CMS is that non-technical people can use it. So for us, because we're working with nonprofits and higher ed, our users tend to look something like this. So they can range from an intern who's a student just looking for a semester. They could be someone who's a subject matter expert, like a researcher, or someone who's department staff who kind of knows everything that's going on within the department. But then that stuff might have to get filtered through someone on leadership who's looking at the big picture goals for the institution, and usually the communications director or someone in communications who's responsible for making sure that everything on the site is communicated consistently and it's branded and all kind of hangs together. And then of course there's IT staff. And in our experience, IT staff are very technical, but they often don't know as much about the specifics of the website that the communications team might know. So everybody's coming at it with a little bit of different needs. So the first thing to do is sort of take stock of who your users are, what kind of expertise they're going to have, and what types of things they need to do on the site. So generally our goals, so when I say regular humans, I'm usually talking about kind of non-technical folks who have a job to do on the site. So we always want to make it easy for those people to do their job day to day. And these next two often you have to balance them out. We always want to provide enough flexibility and choice. We don't want people to feel locked in or like the site is too rigid. And at the same time, we want to help them not mess it up. So that usually means there needs to be a little bit of structure or guidance so that they know the right things to fill in. And we want to save them time and energy whenever we can. So now that we know a little bit about our users, let's talk a little bit about roles and permissions. I'm going to talk about it in a really general way. So here's my little chart of the types of roles that we typically see on these big websites. So the top are kind of the least technical, and they're going all the way down to the most technical. And those kind of correspond a little bit with the types of people I showed you on the previous slide. So content contributors are the people, like it sounds, who are just making content. They aren't necessarily allowed to publish it, but they can usually just generate content in media. Content editors would be someone in communications or a department chair who's responsible for editing and making sure it's all on brand and has the right tone. So for those guys, we can get a little more technical. So we might let them publish nodes. We might let them adjust node queues and kind of order things like in a carousel or wherever else. We might give them SEO tools or things like URL redirects so they can manage that sort of thing. Getting a little more technical, a lot of sites have someone who's kind of a site admin. So this could be someone on IT or communications who's a little more techy. And for those folks, we would give them access to things like menus so they can change the main navigation and the taxonomy structure. Those types of things, if you have a site with 40 content contributors, you do not want them all messing around with the menu, especially once you user tested it. And then we would reserve things like views and blocks for our most technical users. They may seem simple to us if we've been looking at Drupal long enough, but we found that for clients, they are scary and daunting and very prone to breakage. So it's very easy for them to mess things up on the site if they don't know what they're doing. So more and more, we've been restricting those from the kind of regular content contributors. Oh, yeah, so with each of these roles, we don't just customize their permissions, we also customize their menus. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's go over here. So this is an example of a site that's in development right now. And I'm logged in as the lowest level, the content contributor. And notice that my Drupal menu looks really lonely because all my permissions are gone and everything I can do is kind of buried under this one lonely content menu item. So what we normally do is we set up special menus for each role where they see just the stuff that they're allowed to have. And it's a little more intuitive because, let's just reload this for a sec. It just shows them those items kind of larger and there's this big clear toolbar. And then when they go to add content, they can see all the content types here. So we like to make it a little more user-friendly and show them just the tools that they need. So the way that we've done this in Drupal 7 is using this module called Quickbar. It's pretty awesome. It doesn't exist for D8 yet. We're still shopping around for a good way to do this in D8. So love to hear your thoughts at the end if you have any. Sorry, I don't know why my normal spacebar isn't working. Okay, so content types. So I want to talk a little about how to set those up. So a few tips on setting them up. And I'm going to show you a really bad example in a minute. of things, a site that did all of this wrong, and then how we fixed it. So do not create a content type that will only ever have one node. So some people like to create a special content type just for the home page or for a thing there's only going to be one of. You could do that. I think philosophically, you should be creating content types that are going to be templates for many nodes. I can show you examples in a minute. You also don't want to create content types that are strictly based on design. So like, oh, this is a 2 layout page, whereas this is a 3 column layout page. Those should be different content types. No, content types should be based on the structure of the data, not on design layout. So we'll talk about that later. And the content types should typically not be things that could be tags or blocks or other entities. Again, we'll talk about that later. Content types should really kind of stand alone as their own page with their own URL. If you imagine something coming up, you want it to come up in search on its own, that's a candidate for a content type. But if it's just a little chunk of content or a tag, probably doesn't need to be a content type. And you don't want content types that don't contain actual content. Surprise. Okay, so I'll show you an example of a site. So this site that I was just showing you, the old version. Oops. Okay, so here's the old version. There are 54 content types on this poor site. So if you can imagine a non-technical user coming to this and wanting to make some new content, they'd probably be like, huh, where do I begin here? One of my favorite things in here is there's banner, banner gallery slide, banner hero gallery, banner hero slide. Like, which one of those is going to make a slideshow? I don't know. So that gets really confusing. And this is a perfect example of, I think what they did here is they made content types based on different layouts or different designs, but they really are all one thing. Here's another example where this site has 2 different content types that really are the same. So if I don't think I have enough screen real estate to put them side by side, but you can see if we look at them, this one's a publication. It has title, author, article, topics, publication, etc. And then this other one has all the exact same stuff. The only difference is it has a link to an article. So those really should be combined into one content type. And then both of these already have these subtypes at the bottom. So a good way, if you're gonna have 2 content types that share 95% of the same fields, you can just make subtypes and make conditional fields that if you pick this type, then show the user this other field. So that really consolidates things for the user. So I looked back at our most complicated sites over the last 5 years. The most crazy complicated ones had a maximum of 15 content types. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where 54 are really necessary. And just to prove my point, we consolidated this same site. We went through all the content, audited everything, and this, is it this one? No. Yeah, here we go. So here we have it down to 14 content types. And so that's gonna get to my last point, which is you also wanna name things sensibly. So it's good to talk with the users and think about what do they call this content? How do they think about it? And then name it in a way that's gonna make sense to them. Okay. Oh, and I was gonna show you one more thing there. If I can find it. I don't need to show you. There's a content type on that same site called global settings. And you go in there and there's one node and it contains all the Twitter feeds for the site. So that's just kind of weird. That's not really content and there's only one, so it's kind of breaking 2 of those rules. Okay, so we talked about that. Name things sensibly. Probably 20 is like the maximum you'd want to have in real life. Like I said, we got this from 54 content types before down to 14 after, so that's a lot more manageable for people. Okay, so now that you have figured out what your content types are, you want to be thoughtful about fields as well. So on your fields, this is just sort of a quick, no rules are ever set in stone, but this is a good guideline for a number of choices. So if you have fewer than 6 choices on a field, like let's say you're having people pick tags or categories, checkboxes and radio buttons are pretty good. If you have 7 to 20, usually a drop-down menu is good. You can also do drop-downs that open up and have checkboxes in them if you need multiple options but want to condense them a little bit. Once you get over 20 choices, drop-down menus start to get pretty unwieldy. So that's where things like autocomplete can be great. We had a client once who tried to do node references as a drop-down menu, and they had like 200 nodes loading every single time they went to the drop-down, and it got really cumbersome and made the edit screens load really slowly. So autocomplete's definitely a better way to go. And infinite choices, use a text field. So you don't want to be this person. Thanks, internet. Thanks for bad UI examples. Okay, and then once you get all your fields, if you have really complicated content types, those edit pages can go on and on forever. So you might want to think about organizing your content types into tabs. So this is a Drupal 7 screenshot. I think you can do this in Drupal 8. Don't really know yet, but probably. So the idea is if there are fields that are required or really common, you pretty much always need to fill them in, put those out in the open. And then for all the additional fields that are more like optional extras, you can tuck those away in tabs just to clean up the user edit screen a little bit. Help text has the word help in it, so should be kind of helpful. So there's a few tips for help text. Just putting it in isn't necessarily good. It has to be done right. So a good use of help text is to let the user know what they should be putting in here, potentially where it appears, if that's at all confusing, and potentially word counts. So this is telling them, hey, the summary is going to be used for a high-level intro. It's going to be in teasers. Keep it to 80 words max. Another good use is to put in an example of what you would like them to fill in. That's usually really helpful. And for tagging, people do this crazy thing where they decide, oh, gee, my content pertains to all of those audiences. I'm going to check off all the tags. Well, checking off all the tags is the same as checking off none of the tags. Not very helpful. You haven't distinguished it from anything else. So we like to put in little tagging guidelines to say, hey, pick 1 to 3 and call it a day. And then a little mini rant about things that have been in Drupal since day 1. There's a lot of cryptic help text in Drupal because developers wrote it, so be it. So I love this one. Leave blank to use trimmed value of full text as the summary. We all know what that means, but that sounds really cryptic if you don't know Drupal. Like, what is trimmed value? No one knows what that means. Or another one of my favorites. And at Digital Loom, in our install, we killed this. Why does the username and password need help text? Pretty sure people know what they're supposed to do there. So it's really better to have no help text at all than to make it confusing or unnecessary. Okay, next up, the Wysiwyg, another favorite topic of mine. Okay, so we like to make sure that in any Wysiwyg field, whatever styles are baked into your front-end theme should show up here. This is not automatic because typically you're using some other admin theme, and so it's going to show the admin styles. It takes a little extra work to do this, but it's really important. I've trained so many people over the years and just watched them struggle if their styles don't show up there. It's very confusing and creates cognitive dissonance for people. And then you also want to make sure that within the styles menu, be thoughtful about including just the styles that you want them to use. So make sure that all the important ones, like your headings and proper markup, are in there. And then take out, sometimes there's like these big, long default lists of styles that don't actually correspond to anything in your theme. And you don't want people getting overwhelmed. and B, you want them to pick thoughtful styles. Now, here are a few things in the Wysiwyg that are pretty much guaranteed to eventually destroy your design. Font size and color. Many studies have shown that regular humans cannot resist using the font size and color icons. They will change your headings to hot pink, and they will make it, 6 points or whatever. So we just take those out. And what I like to do in training is say like, hey, does anybody know why font size and color aren't here? And let them figure out why they're not there. And someone will usually say, oh yeah, you want your styles to be consistent. Yeah. So just let them know there's a reason that it's not there. Underline, also, people will underline the crap out of everything, and then next thing you know, you're thinking it's a link and it's not, and it just looks bad. And another favorite one that I like to argue with clients about, clients will beg to put in a center button. They want to center everything. Well, if that's part of your design, then that would be baked into the styles. So if your intro text is supposed to be centered, that should be a style. So we usually eliminate those buttons too. Because after all, it's a very slippery slope once you start opening these things up to people. So we don't want to do that. Okay, and then you can also configure the Wysiwyg to use correct markup. So I'll show you a little example of that. Okay, so here's, this is on the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs that I was showing you before. So I have a page here, so notice that our styles are showing up inside the Wysiwyg. So down here, notice that I have kind of incorrectly marked these up as heading 4. And I decide later, oh gee, I want to make these accordion headers instead. Well, the way we see it, accordion headers should really be an H2. And then if you want to put subheaders inside those, you do H3 and H4. So if I click in here right now, and I go up here and I select my style for expandable, and I turn this into an accordion header, notice that we configured CK Editor to always change that to an H2. So that way, if they pick a certain style and we know that style is always supposed to be on a certain tag, we can swap that out for them, and they don't have to think about it. Same thing with links. So we like to build in a lot of link styles so that they can do nice call to action buttons and little arrow links and things like that. So if I click in my link and go up and select one of those little button styles, there we go, have my call to action button. And now if I look at the source, we can see that that class got applied to the A instead of to the P or to some kind of container. So we can configure that in the Wysiwyg. Again, it takes a little extra work, but it's worth it to end up with good markup at the end of the day. Okay, oh, and make sure your preview is realistic. So going back here, let's save this. Now on this site, eventually, we're following Columbia's standards. They don't let us use Quickbar, the one I showed you before, or preview, because they don't have enough downloads. That's very sad to me because Drupal 7 preview is pretty terrible. So if I preview this page, and to me, preview is just another aspect of what you see is what you get. You want people to see what they're going to get before they come in. This is Drupal 7's preview. Again, because we're in 7, it's going to use 7 styles. This looks absolutely nothing like the real page when I preview. Whereas on another site where we do have preview installed, well, I don't have one up, but it renders the real page in an iframe so the person can see the reality of what they're going to get before they save. So way nicer to have preview. And in Drupal 8, we don't have to worry about it because preview's there, just have to not break it. So that's easy-ish. Okay, media. So media is very much a shifting landscape in Drupal 8. And My friend Adam over here is working very hard on that as we speak. Maybe not right as we speak. So I'll talk about our big picture goals. I'll show you a little something that we have set up on one of our internal sites. And at the end, we can talk more about it. So our general kind of hope and desire for media is that we can make images, documents, video, tweets, you name it, kind of modular. And once they're modular, that means that they're also reusable and shareable across the site. So if I create an image, Adam can go into that site and he can reuse the same image on one of the pages that he's making. So that's really nice. And in those media elements, we can store metadata. So that's really nice for our higher ed and nonprofit clients that have to have alt text on all their images. You can put it in once and then it's always there. We also want to make media responsive, whether it's in fields or in the Wysiwyg. And we also want to provide image cropping for different contexts so that they can upload an image once. And if that image ends up being used in a banner, it gets cropped one way, but if they end up using it in a thumbnail, it gets cropped a different way. So I'll show you an example of that. Okay, so this is Hell. This is at Digital Loom, this is our kind of internal knowledge base. And we have, I think, a pretty good media setup in Drupal 8 here. So I'm going to show you around that. So I have my article here called Drupal Concepts for Non-Developers, and I want to add some images to it. Okay, so for my main image, this is kind of my big thumbnail image on the site. I can either add a new media, which I'll do, or add an existing one. So I'll do a new media. I'm going to pick an image. I'll do the Columbia statue, since we're talking about Columbia. Oops. In my alt text. Okay, and then right here in line as I'm adding this, here's my crop features that I mentioned. So I have a couple of, and this is a little small on this screen, but let's see what I can do. I have a couple of crops built in. On a bigger site, I might have more. I could have a crop for the main image, for when it appears in a banner or a carousel. So whatever different aspect ratios I'm going to need, I can do in here. So for my main image, I'll set the crop. This one's kind of a square, so I'll move that around. And then I have a freeform one. This is more like if I want to, I don't want to be locked into an aspect ratio. I just want to be able to crop this however I want. So those are those two crops. Okay, so cropped my image, and I will save this. Okay, so there's my statue. Notice it's using my main image crop, this square that I had. Okay, so now I want to decide, hey, this Columbia statue has nothing to do with my article. I want to go in and pick a different thing. So I'm going to remove that. And notice that I can, if I want, delete the media from the system at that point. I'm going to keep it around, but I'll just remove it from this node. And this time I'll add an existing media. So this is going to take me into this media browser where I can see my whole library. Again, usually I have a little more screen real estate. But what I like about this is that it's searchable on the top. So I have a really nice preview of all my images. So I'm going to pick, since my article is about Drupal, I'm going to search for something related to Drupal. And okay, Drupal cake looks good. Let's pick that. Oops, and of course that didn't work because it's a live demo, but you get the idea. And then lastly, I want to show you if we wanted to use something from the media gallery in the Wysiwyg, we could do that too. So I'll just say I want to put an image over here. I'm going to use this embed tool. And so this, in a minute, I'll show you the suite of modules that we kind of strung together to get all this stuff working. But basically, this lets me either access that media gallery I was just showing you, or I can go back to upload media and find a new one, and which would also create a media entity. So here I can pick that same image and select that. And then here, because I'm putting it in the Wysiwyg, it's going to give me a few choices of, okay, which of those crops that I set before do I want to use? Do I want to keep the uncropped original or use one of those existing crops that's in the system? So I'll go with my main image crop because I thought that looked good. I can align it left, center, right. And then this is pretty cool. This is a little custom code that we added in here. But basically, to make this image responsive, I can choose whether it's taking up a third, a half, a quarter of the screen real estate. And of course, you could make this more granular if you wanted, do like 75% or 25%. So I'll do half and embed that. And there we go. So let's save this. And I'm gonna just log out of here so you can see it without all the admin stuff. Oh, never mind. But you get the idea. Okay, so this is a short list of the modules that it took to do all that. So basically, media entity, and then there's a whole bunch of modules for like media entity image, media entity document, that all just create media as individual entities of all the different flavors that you might want on your site. Entity browser gives you the cool browser that you can use to search all your media. Entity browser IEF provides a little inline button where you can say like add an existing one or upload a new one. And then crop API, media entity crop, and image widget crop all give you the nice cropping interface. Entity embed lets you put things in text fields. And then, like I said, we added some custom code to do the responsive options within the embedded media. So good luck, Godspeed. It's not easy. And this is all changing in core, kind of out from under us too. So my feeling right now is everything with media is kind of experimental and in flux. So pretty exciting. Layout. Okay, so we have tried many different layout tools over the years, and here's what we've come up with. And again, this is always in flux too. So we use blocks and regions for our general page templates. So something like your header and footer on a page at Digital Loom would be blocks. And then any like reusable kind of call outs or things that need to appear multiple times throughout the site, we would also do in blocks. We then would use paragraphs and fields for anything that's a one-off. So you're on a node, you're gonna make, let's say, a call out that's just on that one node, or a field that's on that node but not on another one. Those are, we don't need those to be reused anywhere else, so they can be on the node. And panels, we just say no to panels. I know that's a controversial statement. I know lots of people who love panels, swear by them, use them all the time. The reason we don't use them is because we have had many clients come to us hating their website and saying, please, it's so hard to manage, we can't figure anything out, please fix it. And invariably, they want us to get rid of panels. It just creates a lot of extra layers on the user experience that our non-technical clients have found very, very difficult to work with. So we've just kind of scrapped them, And granted, we have not really explored certain distributions like Panoply or things like that. So who knows, you may have better luck, but our experience has been that panels are way more trouble than they're worth for our users. And here's a fun challenge we've run into with block management. So like I was saying before, we really are getting away from giving block management to your regular kind of content administrators, because blocks are really difficult for people to understand. And it's easy to get something wrong, it's easy to break something. Now, thankfully in Drupal 8, blocks are a little more segregated, where you have your system blocks and then your custom blocks. So that's a step in the right direction. But there's still gonna be a lot of custom blocks that we make as developers that we don't necessarily want the clients messing with. And at the same time, managing which callouts are on a page is something that a non-technical content administrator should be able to do. So that's our conundrum, like what do we do with blocks? So this is another very experimental solution that our developer Tony has worked on. Show you a little video. Maybe. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have a node here. So our idea is that a user would be able to either add a block, which is a reusable block entity. So right here, basically the person is just referencing an existing block to add it to this page. So that would be for anything that needs to be reused across multiple nodes. And then the second one is a custom callout, where when he chose custom callout block, he could add a one-off, either this could be done with paragraphs or field collections or whatever you want, but then you're able to add a one-off block to this page that's not going to become reusable. So this is kind of the direction that we're going in terms of blocks. That way, we as developers can set up all the callout blocks that are supposed to be reused and let people just kind of pick and choose them per page and not have to go into the block management. And we feel like we can probably, in terms of ordering blocks, we can let them order them on the screen, because once they have these two blocks, they could place the order relative to one another. Otherwise, we can make sensible decisions for the site-wide callouts about which things should be first or second. So that is the idea. Oops. Okay, yeah, should I do that? Okay, and last but not least, usability. So let's say you've done all this stuff and you think it's working pretty well, but really, how do you know for sure? How do you get inside the minds of your users who are going to be managing the site? So a couple of tips without doing anything too crazy or time consuming. One is, if you ask the client or whoever you're designing the site for to give you 5 to 10 pieces of content for each content type, go in and load them yourself. Just don't write a script, just sit down and copy and paste and put them in yourself. After doing 5 of them, if there's any pain points, you will feel them, I guarantee you. And that will get the wheels turning about, okay, how can I make this less repetitive? What can I do to speed this up? And that's usually where reorganizing fields comes in, or changing the widgets on fields to make things less painful. And then we always do training sessions for our users before we hand off any site. I hope most companies do that. But basically, before you hand off to the site to whoever's going to use it, make sure you give them a good training session. And just watch what they do. Watch where they're struggling. Watch what they have the most questions with, the most trouble with. Over the years, blocks has definitely been that thing for us. It's like, no matter what we do, no matter how we teach it, no matter what kind of documentation we write, everyone struggles with blocks. So that's what's kind of shaped our thinking over the years too. Okay, maybe don't give them access to the full block manager. It's a little overkill for most people. So those two things alone will give you some pretty good insights into whether your user experience for admins is working. If you did want to do full-on usability testing, that's great too. So again, you would think about who your users are and what they're going to have to do. You can write down some common tasks like create a page, add a photo, add a video, change the heading to, just some common tasks they're going to need. And then watch what they do. And so we have a whole usability testing spreadsheet that we use. And show you that. Okay, so the idea is this is front-end usability testing, but you could do the exact same thing on the back end. So for each task, we give them a 1 or a 0 whether they completed it. We record how much time it took, either until they completed it or they just gave up and sighed in frustration and complained about it. Oops, oh, what's going on there? And then we have them give it a subjective rating. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how 0 is the hardest or impossible, 10 is super easy, and then ask for verbal feedback. And then at the bottom, oops, it's not a good one because the rating got screwed up. At the bottom, we average all those out. So you can really see where, like this is a good example, but sometimes you can see examples where like nobody completed it, but they all gave it a 10. So they had some different ideas about what the task was, or they, were kind of confused about something. Or you can just see things where people took 4 minutes, gave it a 2, but did complete it. So they completed, but it was a real struggle. So this is always really eye-opening to do for any project. So that is it. I hope this is helpful to give some ideas about thinking about the administrative experience for whoever's going to use your site. And I would love to answer any questions. Yeah.
In doing usability testing on the authoring experience, what tools do you use? Do you mostly just have like in-person moderated testing, or are you using like an external to like report screens?
So we really don't do usability testing on the back end. For that, it's usually like I said, if you're training people, you're seeing where they struggle, and we're training so many people at a time that we know when they're having trouble. So this is more like if you wanted to. When we do front-end usability testing, we use GoToMeeting. So we can just work with testers remotely. We can record the screen. We can see their face as they're going through the testing. So that's worked great. And we just use that as our normal web conferencing tool. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all for coming.